Mike Tomlin is inevitable. The Steelers didn't look like a great team heading into the season and even had a huge question mark as to who would even be the starting quarterback, but that doesn't matter, and it hasn't. The Steelers are 3-0 to start the year and just beat the Chargers 20-10. The Chargers got out to an early lead with another Quentin Johnston touchdown. And man, Jim Harbaugh has actually figured out how to use him, and it's honestly so cool to see. Then Justin Fields was able to use his legs for the only other touchdown of the half. The Chargers were up 10-7 going into the half, but then that pesky Steelers defense just played shutdown. The Steelers drilled 2 field goals in the second half, and then Justin Fields found Calvin Austin for a long 55-yard touchdown to make it 20-10. It really was just a fantastic, gritty way to win for the Steelers. Fields is commanding the offense well, it looks like, and you should bet on him being the starter for the long term now. After all, he is 3-0. He ended up throwing for 245 yards and a touchdown with a pick. Calvin Austin had a huge day with 95 yards and a touchdown, and then Najee Harris did what he always does on the ground, pushing through for 70 yards on 18 carries. The Steelers were just clicking. I mean, sure, we do need to see more from the offense, but if the defense is that good, then it'll work. I really just don't know how you switch to Russell Wilson anytime soon at this point. Then on the other side of the ball, it was pretty messy for the Chargers. Justin Herbert ended up going down. I just feel bad for Justin Herbert. He already came into this game questionable because of an ankle injury, and for him to just go down and leave the game, it was really just a mess for the Chargers. Not only did Herbert get hurt, but both Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt did too. At that point, I really don't know how you're expected to even run your offense. It was just an absolute mess. But they are still 2-1, and they're well positioned to have a good year. And that all really just comes back to Jim Harbaugh turning things around. He's already done a great job in LA, and it's shown. But the Steelers have been even more impressive. What Mike Tomlin manages to do every single season is just beyond impressive. It doesn't matter what the roster is like or how talented they are, if they have a quarterback that's even capable, this man finds ways to win. It doesn't matter if it's Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, or even Kenny Pickett. They will win games. Somehow, some way, he just always puts out a good team. And it's really incredible. The Steelers did come into the Chargers game off of back-to-back wins, but the offense still wasn't very good. It was really the defense leading the way, which really just feels so on brand for a Mike Tomlin team. Through the first 2 weeks of the season, the Steelers have not scored 20 points in a game yet, but they are still undefeated. In week 1, they quite literally did not score a touchdown. Chris Boswell carried this team and hit 6 field goals, and that was all the points that they scored. The Falcons only scored 10 points and they lost 18-10. There were a lot of expectations for the Falcons coming into this season, and they just didn't look very good at all. Of course, then Kirk Cousins responded with a crazy drive to beat the Eagles the next week, but the Steelers defense completely shut him down. It was a good building win, but I think we already knew that the Steelers defense was good. All the questions were surrounding the offense, and those still weren't answered. Of course, they then followed it up with an even worse 13-6 win against the Broncos that was truly just gross to watch. Darnell Washington caught a touchdown pass from Justin Fields in the first quarter, and finally, the Steelers had scored a touchdown. Naturally, that was the only touchdown of the game because, of course it was. The Steelers defense held on to win 13-6, and were even up 13-0 entering the fourth quarter. Sure, it was back-to-back wins to start 2-0, but the Steelers were obviously still a team that we weren't sure if they were for real or not. The Steelers were a pretty big topic all offseason just because of the weird quarterback situation that they're in right now. The Kenny Pickett experiment finally came to a close, and that left them looking for a new guy, and they ended up getting 2. They signed Russell Wilson fresh off of that weird tenure on the Broncos, and they also traded for Justin Fields from the Bears. Russ was expected to be the starter, but then he got hurt, and Fields got the nod and quickly got the Steelers out to a 2-0 season, even if it wasn't very pretty. At this point in their careers, it does feel like Fields still has some potential and can maybe turn into a better quarterback, but as for Russ, I think we know what he is at this point. The question really is, which is the better option for the Steelers offense? Because Either way, it's really not that great. For one, the Steelers have tried to fix the offensive line. They've taken an offensive lineman in the first round in back-to-back years now. It was Broderick Jones in 2023, and they just took Troy Fautanu from Washington in the first and took Zach Frazier out of West Virginia in the second. The Steelers know that the line isn't good, but they are at least trying to fix it. Yet, regardless of how the line plays, I'd still bet on Najee Harris managing to run for 1,000 yards because no matter what, that dude churns out the most inefficient, productive seasons. Then it's not like the Steelers have elite weapons either. George Pickens is the number 1, then it's Van Jefferson as the number 2, which pretty much tells you all you need to know. But that's okay, the Steelers are a defensive team. I think it's safe to say that they need to ride the D, and that's going to be the key to success all season. Now, as for the Chargers, they also started the season 2-0, but similarly to Pittsburgh, it left a lot of questions of whether or not they were actually good still. It was back-to-back dubs to start the year, but it was against the Raiders and the Panthers, two teams that didn't exactly have the highest expectations coming into this season. It took a while to get rolling in week 1, but the Chargers mostly took control late, and the Raiders just couldn't respond back. Then week 2 was against the Panthers, who are just truly horrible. They are by far the worst team in the league and have already benched Bryce Young, probably just to save him from whatever that team is. The Chargers went on to beat them 26-3, but they really took their foot off the pedal in the second half. Even after starting 2-0, it was hard to gauge just how good the Chargers were after only 2 games because of the opponents. Granted, the Raiders did turn around to beat the Ravens the next week after they lost to the Chargers, so who knows with them. Early season in the NFL is always just weird. This is a pretty big chance for the Chargers this year. The obvious is Jim Harbaugh being the head coach now after Brandon Staley got axed finally. Harbaugh has already had success in the NFL before when he was with the 49ers and then went on to win a national championship at Michigan, even if he did cheat. But now he comes in and really changes the dynamic and vibes around the Chargers, which I really do think is good. They have fallen short so many seasons in the Justin Herbert era, and something just had to change. Herbert is too talented of a player to be wasted. The entirety of the Chargers seasons really do rely on him, and that's why it was such a concern when he was questionable to play against the Steelers. He's off to a fine start, I mean nothing crazy, but good enough, and I think the expectation was for Harbaugh to come in, take over, and suddenly the Chargers become a run-heavy team, which, does make a lot of sense based off of his track record. But overall, I just think that he's a good coach that's going to get the best out of his players, and he has. One of the coolest things to see this season for the Chargers is probably the play of J.K. Dobbins. He had that Achilles injury and was rehabbing with Aaron Rodgers in the offseason, and especially for a running back, that is just such a big injury to come back from. Yet, after 2 weeks, he was the leading rusher in the league with 266 yards. Oh yeah, and that was on only 27 carries. Just an absolutely absurd stat line. And it's just so good to see him back healthy and playing well. It is also cool seeing him and Gus Edwards still together after they've spent time together in Baltimore. Already you can see the connection between the Harbaugh brothers. Now, one of the biggest things coming into this season was if Quentin Johnston would be able to turn it around. Ladd McConkey has already done some good and shown flashes after he was taken early in the second round, but remember, Johnston was a first rounder last year and he sucked. Maybe it was because he was a yards after catch guy in college and suddenly was asked to be a 50-50 ball guy in the pros, but who knows? Well, Harbaugh has tried to use him correctly, and Johnston had a 2-touchdown game in week 2. So hopefully things just keep getting better for the Chargers, because there's just so much excitement and optimism to be had with Harbaugh and Herbert there.